Bennett,
Daniel,
how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are things with you since our last podcast?
Since our last podcast, let's see. Well, actually, I was contacted through the old the Facebook, as they say. I got a message, and oftentimes when I get a request or a message on Facebook, I don't use it that much. So when I get it, I just think spam, and I'm correct.
Yeah, I've gotten
every time.
a few spam friend requests lately. I just ignore pretty much everything on there.
Have you ever gotten a weird friend request from someone you kind of sort of know, but you were pretty sure you were already friends, and you looked them up, and yeah, sure enough, you are friends with them. So you're like, have they created another one?
I have.
And you're
I have
little
had that
like,
happen.
what's going on? Yeah, I've had this happen too. And then she was like, oh, my account's been hacked. So if you get a friend request from me, the whole thing's peculiar, and I don't know what that means. Like, what do you have any speculation on that?
What they mean when they say their account has been hacked?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm sure they have been hacked, but to what ends? Like, what is this hacker looking for by friending me? Let's say I accept, and then they what? Like, they don't have access. I mean, I guess they have access to my photos and can steal my information, I suppose.
I mean, maybe they're stealing your information to impersonate you in some situation to get your password or something. I don't really know.
It's nebulous and it's worrisome. But in this case, it struck me as, first of all, it was someone who seemed so vaguely familiar that I couldn't put my finger on it, and then it didn't seem, unfortunately, probably, or at least my experience, you'll get a really clear fake, porn type account that's just gross, and you just immediately block whatever. It wasn't like that either. And so she friend requested me, and then I messaged her, and then it turns out she's like a cousin, a distant cousin, one that I actually remember. And then we messaged back. I'm just bad at messages, and I'm not that interested in it. And she's about 24 and has been reconnecting and doing this whole 23andMe, and contacting family. And she's from a side of the family that I don't even want to go all into it, but my dad's sister, they're not very close, and she was on that side, and she's just been essentially felt compelled to figure out who she is, and part of that journey, which I totally get. We all want to find out who we are in this world.
Sure.
And so that has led her to reaching out to long-lost brothers and sisters and all of this stuff, and you could see that journey being posted on Facebook. And I thought to myself, that's really cool, and I sort of get why people do that, and then I feel almost like something's wrong with me that I'm curious about doing one of these 23andMe for maybe personal, like if I have a kid, what's the likelihood they'll have disease X or whatever. Right. But I feel almost guilty that I don't know. Like, if I found out I had a long lost cousin, I wouldn't be like, oh, I've got to reach out to them, or I've got to message them.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I guess I just don't place a high value on family just because they're family. Just because they're family, I place a higher emphasis on the relationship involved. And so, I mean, I couldn't even name my second cousins. I guess that just means I'm a really crappy family member in a lot of cases. But I just don't really have a lot of interest in figuring out who my great-great-great-great-grandparents were, or where my ancestors came from. The genetic testing, 23andMe stuff. My main interest would be the same as yours. What genes do I have, and what predilections do I have, and what genes that I have say certain things about my behaviors or whatever.
Do you think you and me maybe not caring as much about that sort of thing is a reflection of privilege? And I don't use that in the political sense, but that in the sense that I suppose long ago, your family was your. We talk about relationships and how you value the relationship over the bloodline, but your family it's your first relationship. It's the cards you're given when you're born into this world. Like this, these are the people around you, and these are the ones you're going to. That are going to help you navigate through this crazy mixed up world of ours. Yeah, they're gonna blood is stickier than water. Because they say blood is
stickier than water.
Yeah, blood is stickier than water, as they say. Yes,
family will stick with you through thick and thin,
thin and thick,
thin and thick.
Yes, and so that, especially when relationships were. I don't know if they're easier to come by now. There are more relationships. We're more intertwined across the world than ever before. So, anyway, I don't know. I'm just thinking like, is it a privilege to be able to go? I don't need those relationships as maybe I would have if I were born long ago in the past.
Maybe. I mean, that's a possibility. I think another possible explanation is that you and I are both pretty independent. And, a big part of familial relationships in the past, it was dependence. You have to rely on your family for certain things, money or shelter or whatever. And obviously we had to do that when we were kids. But independence it's a trait that we both have. And maybe it's just that we don't feel the need to reach out and rely on family members for whatever sort of finding ourself or knowledge or gratification we might want.
I guess you're almost making the same point I'm making, is that people long ago had to depend on each other more, and because of modern luxuries, it's easier to be independent. And since we're less dependent, then our needs are met, and we don't have that particular need to be filled. We don't need someone there. Like I have friends, I do have family. I feel supported. My network of support is fulfilled. And maybe if I had a personal crisis, and I'm not suggesting that my cousin that reached out to me is experiencing that, but maybe there would be a moment when I wanted to re-examine my social network or my support systems, and just like the natural place to turn then would be family. And there's just sort of I don't blame anyone for being curious. If I found out I was adopted or whatever, like that would be I would feel almost compelled to reach out. But what about you? I'm kind of having this deja vu. We've tread this ground before. If you found out you were adopted, would you feel compelled?
If I found out now that I had been adopted, I just wouldn't really care. I would go, "Huh, really? Huh, weird. Why didn't you tell me before?" But I wouldn't. I wouldn't really care. Like, I don't know these people who are my biological parents in this hypothetical situation. Unless I really was adopted, I could have been.
Do you think you're in the minority of opinion there? Like, what do you? I just
Probably.
suspect that most people will go, "Holy crap!" Just kind of like you would, and then go, "I've got to find out who they were."
This is the plot of dozens of Lifetime Channel movies, right? Is someone finds out they were adopted, and then the whole course of the movie is them like going through dramatic episodes of trying to find out who their parent is and reconciling their feelings about the whole matter. And like I don't know, because I don't know any real life instances of this happening. I don't know whether that sort of behavior is common or whether that's just played up for dramatic purposes. So I can't really say. I just don't think it would really affect me that much. A lot of people, I guess, would get caught up wondering, why did they abandon me, or was I not good enough, or whatever. But like, I just wouldn't have those thoughts, because I would just be like, well, I was a baby, and like, there's no reason to think like I was a deficient baby, and that's why.
The question of was I not good enough is certainly just not. I just don't think that's the answer. It's what was going on in their life, what circumstances led them to this was the best decision to make. Like the answer is almost not going to be pretty, right? It's not like life was going great, I was in a loving relationship, and then you came along and we thought, vacation time just sounds a lot better than raising. And I just doubt that that's the path. Well, it's not a pretty path that led to it.
It's probably not a pretty path, and so. Why do I want to learn that? Every human being has some amount of drama in their life. They have some issue or some complication or some problem, why pick this one person to go learn about their, big lifetime drama when they have not, I have no relationship with this person, even though they are the one that potentially birthed me. Like, other than that one string connecting the two of us, there's nothing else. Well, so, like, why pick that person to learn about?
I see your point, but I think framing it as one string is almost. I feel like let me push you a bit. It's almost like you're being hyper rational. Like, you make a great logical
what other
case,
string is there?
It's just calling it a string gives this metaphor of this thin thing connecting us and that one little thing. Whereas I suspect there's almost a biological impulse or some sort of evolutionary like because I'm just guessing that this sort of like parent child relationship is so strong. There is some sort of innate connection based, for survival.
So what if someone lied to you and told you that someone else was your mom? Would you immediately have a strong connection to this person?
Well, lies are complicated. Like, so if I've been,
that's the thing.
It wouldn't be okay. It wouldn't be. I wouldn't automatically have a connection. But obviously, if I'm believing the lie in this situation, yet would I feel? I would feel something being told I'm adopted. I would feel something more than whoa. I would feel like I'd like to know more. And that's what I'm saying. My impulse is that I would like to know more. Yours is, that sounds like a can of worms. My life's pretty good. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah,
that's enough.
Essentially, that's a pretty good summation of kind of what I would think about the matter. I'm not sure I agree that I do agree that having parental figures is very important, but presumably your adoptive parents would already fill those roles, so you already have that need filled, and right. Now you learn that your parents are actually your adoptive parents, and you find out that you have biological parents out there somewhere. What drive is there to learn more about those people? Well, that's what I don't understand. I definitely can get behind the fact that there's a drive to have a parental relationship, but I'm not convinced that there's something inherently biological about that it has to be your biological parents that is the cause of this drive.
And I think it's clear that you don't need a biological parent to have a great parent. There's no one's questioning that. Yeah. But I do wonder if let's just pull some numbers out of our butt and say that 95% of people, maybe you'll disagree, but like you tell 100 people that they've been adopted, and 95 are going to at least strongly wrestle with the question of whether they want to reach out to their parents. It's going to be on their minds for a long time. Where 5 might just kind of shrug and go and walk along and go, "Thanks for telling me." Or is that a reason? I mean, whatever number.
Maybe.
Let's say it's 80.
That's possible. I mean, I don't know what the proportion might be. That's what I was saying. Like, I think that this narrative has spun a lot in movies and TV, and I don't know what the realistic response is. I don't, and I've not had this conversation with people, so I don't know whether my response is unusual or not.
I guess you're right.
I mean, I can take your opinion for the matter, and now I have learned something about myself, that I have an unusual reaction in the case that I'm adopted. But that's all I know. I have no data points on this issue,
and I really don't either. Like, for me to kind of come and say, "Well, I suspect your opinion is bizarre," or not bizarre, but just an outlier almost. I really am almost uncomfortable moving forward. But I wish I could just say that that's the case, and then say, well, why is it? Is it because we've been conditioned by Lifetime movies, or is it because there's something that says I need to know? Or because honestly, I might not reach out to them either. By the way, but I would be polling people and asking, and probably even like losing sleep and having dreams about it. Would like really plague me about whether or not to reach out or not.
Part of the issue, part of the motivation, I think it's a combination of simple curiosity and the fact that it's personal and mysterious, because it's so far back in your past that it's something that happened to you that you have no recollection of when you were born. At least I don't remember when I was born.
Right. I don't either.
Okay.
Thank God.
Whew. And so, it's something deeply personal that happened to you, and like it's a mystery. That's simply it. And so if you have any sense of curiosity, then that's something that would at least make you question, what were the circumstances surrounding that decision? And I wonder what those people are like. And I mean, even idle curiosity, things that would, I would ask these questions. Sure, I would be like, that's, interesting. But I wouldn't have some strong drive to seek them out. I would wonder things like, I wonder if I look like them. But past that, it just wouldn't motivate me that much.
So do you think a lot, or it'd be far more on the nature-nurture spectrum, the reason people are reaching out is because of they've been nurtured or they've been conditioned, not just through Lifetime movies, but this sort of a sense of duty and family, and
yes.
And like almost like it's been a violation of something deep that they left. They
yes.
put you up for adoption, and they're like, we need answers because we almost have a duty, or I deserve some sort of explanation, and
yes.
combine that with the mystery.
Yes,
okay.
Definitely. You can imagine a culture in which children are raised more communally, communistically.
Yeah. Communistically.
Where the parents have less, or I should say the community has a greater role in raising the kids. And I can't name a culture like this, but I'm sure there are some.
No, I've read about some though.
Right.
And really quickly, I'll just say, I know I'm interrupting your thought, but that they don't have a word for mom and dad. They have more of like a parental figure, like male parental figures and female parental figures. And it actually, because you use those words, you have your relationship with the elders in your community are different and more familial. And it's like, it takes a village to raise a child. And so you don't have the intimacy with that biological father. So go ahead.
So, well, yeah, that's essentially where I was going with that. Because you don't have that strong intimacy, you're not conditioned to have such an overriding drive to know your specific mother and father. And so if you were to find out that who you thought was your mother and father wasn't your mother or father, then you wouldn't have such a strong drive to answer those questions.
Well, maybe you've convinced me. If I ever find out I'm adopted, I'll respond differently.
Okay. I have something I want to read to you.
Okay, I'm down.
So, just listen up.
Do I need to do anything else? I feel like the way you pitched that, I'm like a little giddy.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
I had for my winter evening walk no one at all with whom to talk, but I had the cottages in a row, up to their shining eyes in snow, and I thought I had the folk within. I had the sound of a violin. I had a glimpse through curtain laces of youthful forms and youthful faces. I had such company outward bound. I went till there were no cottages found. I turned and repented, but coming back, I saw no window but that was black. Over the snow my creaking feet disturbed the slumbering village street, like profanation, by your leave, at 10 o'clock of a winter eve. So...
Snap, snap, snap. Would you like me to say more? That sounded like a poem.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What did I just read to you? What the heck was that thing?
It sounded like a poem to me.
How do you know? How do you know that was a poem?
There was a certain rhyme scheme and flow to it. It had almost this musical element when you were reading. It sounded like, in terms of, we could get into what is poetry, but it had a concentration on a particular topic or feel. Examined it closely, and I would need to listen again. But I think it was like an AABBCC rhyme scheme, like okay. Each two couplets essentially.
So it rhymed, had a rhyme scheme. It dealt with a particular topic,
nature in this case, I would say, and that's very common in poetry.
And so is that okay? So I know you're an English teacher, so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this piece of writing. And so you called it a poem. Do you think it was written by a professional poet?
I feel like you're setting me up to either be by a professional poet or be by you, if I'm being honest. It felt of professional quality. Any doubts that creep into my mind was the simplicity of the rhyme scheme. But who am I to say? Yes, it felt like a professional poem.
Okay. So
let me just say this: if I wasn't suspicious by the way you framed this,
sure,
if I wasn't in sort of a hyper like what's going on mode, then I would just be like, yeah, that's a poem.
Well, it's good that you have your antenna up here, because I've got a great list of things to read for you and get your analysis of. So that was an easy one. I'm starting off with the easy ones. So that you readily, before I even asked the question, you readily identified that as a poem. And you pointed out that it rhymed and dealt with the topic and all of that stuff. And you think that it was of professional quality. So, I mean, I guess you can kind of read between the lines of what I'm saying here and know that some of the things that I'm going to read to you are professional poems and some are not. I'll go ahead and spill the beans. That is a professionally written poem by Robert Frost, who I'm sure you've heard of.
I've heard of the guy.
So when you mentioned you were suspicious. I mean, obviously because this is a setup, but also you mentioned the simplicity of the rhyme was one reason why you were suspicious. Why does that have anything to do with it?
It shouldn't. I was just thinking. Honestly, I was thinking like you're a smart guy and you have the capability of crafting something of that nature. If you were intentionally trying to throw me off the scent, it was because you dealt with things, even referencing, I believe, like a violin and the topic of snow are not something that Bennett would write about. So
really? I love snow.
Well, you do. Okay, yeah, you love snow, but
I actually like violins too.
Well, I mean, I don't have the poem in front of me, so, but it did not have the sort of wit that if you were writing, not trying to disguise yourself. I feel like I know you well enough that your voice would be revealed, and that if this were written by you, you would have disguised. I mean, it's a compliment to you, really, that I think you're capable of crafting what is likely a famous poem that I'm just,
I don't know how famous it is. I just.
I mean, Robert Frost.
It's Robert Frost, so
yeah,
and I know
huge,
I've actually heard of him, as opposed to basically every other poet. So. Simplicity should not be a knock. There's William Carlos Williams poems that are simply a line. I mean, poetry is one of these fields that's ripe for. This is a great topic because you could read me some nonsense and it could be a poem or not. And it's even from if you wanted to call me an expert, so to speak, as an English teacher. You are an expert. That's why.
Okay.
That's why I'm doing this.
It makes me more nervous
because you can speak from authority on these matters, and I really don't know what the heck poetry is, especially after looking at some poetry, and so I really want to figure this thing out. We need to get this straight and set these guidelines so that people can start really writing poetry instead of potentially nonsense.
Well, it's actually
actually I have a more sinister motivation because I'm going to quit my job as an engineer and become a poet because this crap is easy.
What do they say about modern art? It's the kind of thing you look at and you say, I could do that, but the point is you didn't. Whoever else did, and that's what makes it.
I'm going to flip this script so quick. I talk a lot about how I'm going to, in a few years, I'm going to have a rap album, a country album. I'll do some modern art. I'll have a young adult novel, and I'll add poetry to the list. I'm really good at parody in that way. It's not even parody; it's serious parody. It is.
Serious
what is it
parody.
called? Copying, I guess. I mean, it is
sincerity.
Original plagiarism. That's what we'll call it.
Original plagiarism, sincerity.
Yeah,
it's not ironic; it's sincere.
Homages. All right, I have another one that I want to read to you. So
let's do it.
In her dark, she surveys empty, the vanity from the in-laws' Bronx apartment, the brooch from a lover, loafers by a coat tree, trench coat, the husband's profile, an alarm, for news and forecast. Here she appraises fidelity before the light violates.
Here she appraises
fidelity
before the light violates.
That is correct. Thoughts?
It didn't speak to me in the way the first one did. Okay, let's cut through some crap for a second. And what's weird, what's about poetry?
Let's do it. This is This is the point. I want to cut through this crap, man. This is annoying.
I suppose it annoys. The annoying thing about poetry is anything can be a poem, and so even if you say, "Well, I just scribbled this down," or "I found this on some blog that's not of professional quality," that doesn't. Or if you found some parody website, like, it still doesn't mean it's not. To some degree, it's in the eyes of, or in the ears of the listener. Right. Like, how we treat it might have something to do with whether or not it is in fact a poem. Like, if we treat it as a headline, is it then a headline? Mm-hmm. If we treat it as a tweet, is it then a tweet?
So what I'm hearing is that anything can be a poem as long as we let the reader know it's supposed to be a poem.
It's the same problem that befalls art. Like,
what is art?
If we all contemplate it, like if it's a porta potty, but then you put it in a museum and we all go around and we contemplate how it's a criticism of the status quo or whatever.
Right.
Then is it art? I mean, honestly, I think it can sincerely be art at that point if it was intentionally placed and positioned in which we contemplate it. I know it is smirk worthy.
Yeah, right,
sure. That's the problem, is like that definition is so ill defined that it's just not going to satisfy someone who's demanding kind of clarity, when the point of poetry is obfuscation through clarity.
That's a wise
it's clarity.
Words.
No, it's clarity through obfuscation. Dang it!
Dang, you messed up. You messed up my one contribution.
So when you say listen up and you clear your throat and you present these words, you frame it. And it has some rhythm, and it has some flow, and it has some meaning, maybe nebulous, a little bit bizarre. Like, it's hard to declare it as not a poem. But so that's why it's kind of crap. I get why people say, well, is it poetry, is it not, who want to define it, put it in a box, and be able to say it's either in the box or out of the box. Like, it's not either. It's none of this nonsense. Then everything I'm saying is going to just sound like nonsense.
So I mean that's my understanding as well. So if there is no clear delineation of what a poem is it at least more clear what a good poem is?
To the individual, absolutely. Where I would say the first reading was enjoyable to me, and it created the imagery in my head, and I was thinking about snow, and this one it felt a little political, had political undertones and grievance, and
it didn't rhyme.
That actually doesn't matter as much to me, even though I understand that rhyming creates a rhythm and a. But I've never been one. I mean, I appreciate that, but that doesn't make it or break it for me.
That doesn't make it not a poem or not a poem. But does it? You're saying that doesn't affect whether it's a good poem or not. There can be
not to me
equally good poems, in your opinion, that rhyme
yes.
and don't rhyme.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I guess let's press forward. We have plenty of material.
Okay, but do I get answers for each?
I'll tell you. So, what do you think about that one? Do you think that was written by a professional? Can you read it
quickly again? Can you read it more casually, as if you're not presenting me a poem? Just read the lines.
Yes. In her dark, she surveys empty the vanity from the in-laws' Bronx apartment, the brooch from a lover, loafers by a coat tree, trench coat, the husband's profile, an alarm for news and forecast. Here she appraises fidelity before the light violates.
I would also say that that's a legitimate poem.
Why?
Taking I think another little insight to poetry is you take simple concepts familiar and then you defamiliarize them with some words. Like the word brooch, I'm not saying it's a complicated one.
It's certainly a rare word.
Yes, it's just used less. Yeah, it is. And so that's not a really good answer, but it takes a familiar moment and then it introduces maybe even another familiar feeling that seems a little abstracted, and it ties it all together. So it takes the familiar and then defamiliarizes it for a new sort of meeting. Or you take something unfamiliar and then you familiarize it. That's just a good way to think about how to approach a subject. And I think it just seemed intentional and it had enough. And if I was a betting man, I would say, yep, that's a quote unquote. I mean, I'm going to put quotes on all of them, so I'm going to stop justifying, but just say that that's a real poem.
Obviously, you will continue to maintain your job as an English teacher, regardless of how you.
A little nervous. Yes, I'm a little nervous about that.
So, these are mild potential gotchas, but really, it's just an exploration of a topic. So don't be too nervous. This is a professional poem, I presume, by a poet named Kimiko Han. So this
2 for 2.
This is a real professional poem. Is it a good poem?
It.
Not in your opinion. You already kind of said that, I guess.
And not in my opinion, but I could legitimately see someone coming to that. I respect the poem, and I did not like it.
All right. The first one, by the way, was called Good Hours. That was Robert Frost. I forgot to say the title.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's press on.
Okay.
This one is called Wooden Teachers. Near the lake, aside the trail, there grow 2 trees entwined, one a proud tall hardwood oak, another softwood pine. At distant glance they seem as one, their trunks a single bowl, yet on approach their likeness wanes, 2 pieces, not a whole. How came these trees to their embrace? What cause fixed them so? What errant zephyr sowed their seeds so near decades ago? Do they battle for light and rain, upward struggling strife? Or is it mutual support, their difference aiding life? Would they prefer to be apart instead among their kin? Would felling them be gentle mercy, or the gravest sin? The answer I fear I'll never know, their lives will outlast mine. For now I'll just keep wondering, should I seek oak or pine?
I enjoyed that.
Why did you enjoy that one compared to the others, or compared to the last one?
I suppose, I mean, obviously you kind of heightened my attention with an interesting title, Wooden Teachers, that talking about these trees and the nature of them and contemplating the meaning that goes well beyond trees. So, I mean, it has all these elements of being thoughtful. I appreciate its clarity, rhyme scheme, all of that stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I'm just going to go with it's real or not real. Like my gut I would read that in a printed form and not question for a moment the sincerity or the quality and go, man, this is kind of iffy. There's a part of me that suspects is just a little bit suspicious of you. There's a little bit of Bennett in this one, but I'm going to go with it. It's real.
Why do you think that there's a little bit of Bennett in this poem?
Well, could you read the first line again?
Of all poems.
Go ahead.
Near the lake, aside the trail, there grow two trees entwined.
I happen to know there's a lake. Well, this is silly, but there's a lake outside. I think we write from what we know. You called it Wooden Teachers. I'm a good friend of yours. I'm a teacher. I know that isn't about like teachers in that traditional sense. It's that all things can be teachers. But we discuss philosophically what does it mean to teach a lot. And if you had this idea to give me, and then you were out walking around the trail just thinking of things, this would present itself. And I'll say, if you did write this, very good job, like very, very good poem. But again, I'm just going to stick to my answer that it's a real poem. You're such a sleuth. Yeah, I wrote this one. I'm proud of myself. Actually really good sleuthing there, because I mean it is based on a true story. I mean, I do live by a lake, and there are two trees, an oak and a pine, that grow like right next to each other, and I have contemplated these trees before. And so this is legitimate poetry. I'm a poet, and I didn't even become aware of my own potential. I wish I could have gotten on with you there. That would have been good. I would have said the line. That is a very good poem, Bennett, and I mean that. And I don't think it had. I think it's easy for you to write something that's a little snide, and I don't think that had that in there. Well, I thought that was a sincere poem.
I was trying to trick you. I was trying to write a good Robert Frost style poem. That's what I was doing, so I succeeded, I guess.
Well,
even though you were suspicious. You were suspicious enough
missed
that I don't.
it, but not really. I think I qualified just to make it that I was right either way, which is unfair. But I really think I nailed that, to be honest.
Yeah, you got it, man. Good job. Good. Now I'm worried that you're a good English teacher. You fooled me. I will say,
you fooled me.
Huh? What?
That's just a funny thing to say. You're a good English teacher. You fooled me.
Nah, I'm just messing with you. It was actually quite fun to write. It trying to fit the syllable count and everything reminded me of when I used to make fun of your Facebook statuses and stuff.
That's actually, okay, so part of, like, whether it's a haiku or whatever arbitrary structure you decide to confine yourself to, like, that sort of exercise is, I think, just really healthy. And most of it is just, it boils down to syllable count and saying, it's arbitrary, but I'm going to discipline myself enough to do this. That's good writing practice, no matter what. It's like an interesting thing that I'm going to make a paragraph, and it has to be 333 words. Yeah. Then you have to start rearranging stuff, and good things can be born out of that.
Well, it tests your vocabulary because many, many, many times you want to say something and it doesn't fit the syllable count, and so you have to think of new words. If you're holding yourself to a rhyme, that restricts the vocabulary even more, and you have to be even more creative with what you pick. And like trying to I had an idea in my head, but I didn't know where the poem was going to end up at the beginning because
you shouldn't. By the way, that's good poem writing right there.
I was held to the structure, and the structure dictated in part where it ended up. So it was an interesting experience.
At the end of this podcast, I'd like to hear that one again.
Yeah. All right, let's press forward.
Okay.
Let's see what's next here. Okay. Here we are. My anger is blue, and with this raucous breath I proclaim, irredeemable hatred must not abate, wherein benevolent violence oft dances wildly. So let not thy upturned boots deny the oppression due to antiquity.
I was a little underwhelmed by that one personally. Like it had this sort of Shakespearean quality, but to me it felt like a smart freshman or sophomore in high school, someone who's experimenting with words, doing what they should be doing, right? Like this is a person on their path to writing good poetry who's not there yet because they read some Shakespeare and felt inspired, and it had like a teenage vibe to it. I'm nervous about everything I'm saying, but I'm just trying to give
Don't be nervous. There's obviously no risk in being wrong, and
I don't want to like bore listeners by asking you to read it again, but so I will just give kind of my impulse.
It's short.
Feedback.
Do
it one more time.
If it's short, I can read it through for you. There are a couple of longer ones I have that I won't bother, but
okay.
All right,
go ahead.
My anger is blue, and with this raucous breath I proclaim, irredeemable hatred must not abate, wherein benevolent violence oft dances wildly. So let not thy upturned boots deny the oppression due to antiquity.
There's an angsty quality to it, and my anger is blue. I'm just going to stand by what I said.
Not professional.
Yeah.
That is correct. I wrote this poem, and my attempt was to. I titled it "Pretension."
Well, I guess that's what I mean when I'm saying a teenager. Right? I mean, I've read a lot of teen poetry, and it ranges from "I just had to do this assignment and I don't care" to "I'm trying to impress the teacher and I kind of misused the synonym feature on Microsoft Word." To like this understanding that poetry has this, it's a little bit difficult to grasp, and you certainly, through capturing that pretentious quality. Pretentiousness.
I don't even think pretension is I think pretension. Pretension is when you are developing high blood pressure.
When you have.
So it's not
right
even
before
it's not even
tension.
a real word as the title, so it's perfect.
Yeah, it's right before you have tension. It's pre-tension.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, I really got just this teenage vibe, and yeah. So
dang,
but
you
threw me off. I didn't.
I'm actually impressed by your analysis abilities so far.
Well, I didn't suspect you. I actually suspect you said you were going to get it. You got it from like kid poetry or teen poetry or I don't know.
.com.
.org. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just tried to pick like really, really strong buzzwords and to paint a picture of like, I don't know, like just anger and injustice and blah 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 blah.
Which is so totally teenager feel.
Benevolent violence. That's a nice poetic phrase.
Yeah.
So, good job. Good job. All right.
You're a little mad that I'm
a little mad that you got that one. That's my postmodern poetry. No rhyme, sentences don't make sense, and you
it almost makes. I mean, it gives a feel for like the making sense, but it doesn't quite. There's a little bit of awkward phrasing, but it's nice in its own right.
Yeah, you saw right through it. All right, next one. Here we go. So I count my hopes. The bumblebees are making a comeback. One snug tight in a purple flower I passed to get to you. Your favorite color is purple, but Prince's was orange, and we both find this hard to believe. Today the park is green. We take grass for granted. The leaves chuckle around us. Behind your head, a butterfly rests on a tree. It's been there our whole conversation. By my old apartment was a butterfly sanctuary where I would read, and two little girls would sit next to me. You caught a butterfly once, but didn't know what to feed it. So you trapped it in a jar and gave it to a girl you liked. I asked if it died. You say, you like to think it lived a long life. Yes, it lived a long life. Thoughts on that poem?
My thoughts are, it had this sort of stream of conscious quality, so I both liked this and did not like this. My impulse is to say that it is real and that you were attempting to find a real poem that, like, when you said apartment, it made me nervous because that sort of, I don't know what I want to say, like realism or modern inclusion or just very concrete, understandable thing seems a little not deep enough to be in a poem. Like, yeah, by my apartment. Like there's a reason you didn't say walking along the lake outside my apartment. It just gives it brings us to a present. It dates it in a way. Even using the word apartment feels so modern. I think it was real. I think it had the stream of conscious quality. And I think that if I were to read it again, my initial was like, yeah, it was okay. There were parts I liked. There were parts I really didn't. And that if I were to unpack it and read it several times, I might fall in love with that poem.
Interesting. Well, I forgot to read you the title.
Oh, yeah.
The title is, I Don't Know What Will Kill Us First, The Race War or What We've Done to the Earth.
Oh, God. Oh.
Do you still kind of like it? Think you might fall in love with that one?
That would have actually been really good to catch on video. I was really just had both my hands on my face, and I just realized how.
The poet.
Wow.
You're right. That is a real poem. The poet is Fatima Asghar. I don't know what will kill us first, the race war or what we've done to the earth. So.
What a miserable title.
Look, this one struck me, and I could not include it because the title, of course, like. I'm sure that many poets would tell me what the title has to do with the poem. But
I feel like I'm doing a good job of reading your brain and how you selected these.
Yes, you're right. You're doing an exceptional job at this. I'm a little bit annoyed by it, but
no, it's more it's cool that I'm doing.
You're right. No, you're right. It is also cool. I'm still a little annoyed, but because I wanted to get. Well, there's plenty left. Yeah. But look, this poem. There are no capital letters. In this poem, and
no punctuation, or
there is punctuation, but it's weird, and the paragraphs or stanzas are not like they cut sentences in half and in part. Like it's almost as if they wrote it out in a big long chunk and then just arranged it into lines of 3 without any consideration of what the words are.
Does
that make sense?
It does. I can tell when you're reading when you're usually on a line or not. Just
yeah,
the way you're
it messes me up.
This is going to be.
So what I want to ask you, how much of a part of poetry is the visual, like putting the words on the page, arranging them, putting punctuation in there, all of that stuff, capitalization, like how much of a part of poetry is that?
I should have alluded to this earlier when just kind of broadly defining it. I think it's a huge part of it. The thing about poetry and the beauty of it is that you can be boldly experimental and you're not confined to the typical constraints of how we use punctuation. And in fact, you're encouraged to, I mean, in some cheesy ways, you could maybe make the poem, each line, the shape of a Christmas tree, and you write a nice Christmas poem, whatever. You do anything you want. The sort of that sort of postmodern crap about like what you're describing just sounds kind of like the why poetry gets a pretentious label. But I think this invites students. People may roll their eyes, or kids may roll their eyes if it's like, today we're doing poetry. Like, you're going to get some people that are really excited. It's polarizing. Some are super excited. Some are like, oh my God. But if you can overcome that sort of pretentious or nebulous feeling that you get when you approach poetry, I like that it invites people in who are typically intimidated by grammar or the construction and like have kind of no idea. Like, they only have some grasp of what a paragraph is. But this says, it doesn't matter what you know or don't know. Like, use your intuition. And actually, I think it could be used to teach grammar effectively in the sense that, like, well, why are you breaking the line here? Do you want a short pause or a new idea? Or do you want a clause or a phrase to stand on its own to really emphasize it? Or do you want to put a dash to like, you get to internally construct a poem based on whatever your own merits or your own decision making. So really cool. So yes, I think that's such a big part, the visual piece of a poem and what you do with the lines and that sort of thing. So
Interesting.
I don't know how you're going to read this to me that I like. It sounds like it's very visual. Like, what you're talking about is communicating something visually that is hard to
for that poem, I found a website that I don't remember, I think it's like poets.org or I don't know, just some basic site that collects tons and tons of poetry. And they're not presented in any fancy, like, artistic manner. It's just text on the page, but it does have formatting, meaning white space included. That poem, by the way, was in a category. There are tons of categories and tags, and that one was in the social justice category.
Are you talking about the previous one you read? I thought you had just given away your current one.
No, the one I just read about the bumblebees. Or Prince, or whatever, the race war, I guess.
Yeah,
had nothing about race. Had nothing about race in the whole poem.
Yeah.
But one interesting thing I noticed when I was searching within that category is that the number of poems before 2014 was extremely small compared to the number of poems after 2014.
I mean, maybe the poem, the website didn't really take off until then, right? Or is it not that simple?
I mean, that category was anomalous. There were poems from
that
ancient
category.
poems.
Sorry, I missed that.
The social justice category on the site.
Gotcha.
So just an interesting thing I saw that this category really picked up steam in 2014.
Interesting. And
I also, just out of morbid curiosity, did a search for poems containing the word Trump, and only found 2. So, hey, not as bad as I thought.
Okay, yeah, good.
All right, moving forward. This one is called An Austrian Man. It was on the shores of Austria that I became a boy, having first been a man. Should not time proceed forward? But shrapnel, fire, and brimstone, the ever-sounding drum of cannons, and a forced march into the jaws of death can invoke childlike terror. And, childlike, my tiny fingers fumbled, my musket jammed, my green shadows turned slowly red, an iron monster's gaze swiveled near, and I cried. And lo, my cries were drowned, not by gunpowder and the void, but by the jets of the Swiss their army was come to return us to the field, and me my manhood.
Ooh. I liked it. I mean, I would just say that's a good poem. I liked it. This chronology of time, but then saying I went from man to child when, it's a reversal of expectations, and then to explain the the terrors of war. I would say that it's worthy of being a real poem if it's not. I mean, like, the only reason I would say it's not is suspicion, and I'm going to try not to let that. I'm just saying it's a real poem. It felt like a real poem.
I wrote this poem.
Nice.
And I wrote this poem. This was my trickiest one to try to trick you, and I did.
You got me. You very much got me.
Because Austria is landlocked. It doesn't have any shores.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to catch any of that.
I know you're not going to catch that. I mean, it's on its face, without analysis, it's a poem about World War II, you would guess, right?
That's what I would have guessed, yeah. But and then I was like, musket, though? Like, what?
Yeah. They didn't have muskets in World War II, and there weren't jets.
I wouldn't have thought so.
The Swiss were neutral, and Austria's
So you were just trying to be completely outrageous.
Yes.
Well done.
I mean,
that's satisfying.
It is. Yeah, it is satisfying. Well, because
the musket thing was like, I wanted to point that out, but I honestly didn't want to reveal myself to be that ignorant. If I was like, I would feel. I felt this is the stupidity. My historical stupidity is on full display when I'm like, well, that doesn't make much sense. But I'd rather not mention it because better to remain silent, than to reveal myself and say muskets and jets. That doesn't make sense. And then go, are you kidding me? If you'd have responded with authority about how dumb that was, I would have been like, oh, okay. So,
what I want to know is poetry easy or what? Because like I just kind of picked a thing, picked some like visuals and stuff, and threw them in. It doesn't rhyme. I just threw them into some lines, and I managed to have a piece that that at least you really liked, and with if I were to fix the historical inaccuracies, might be considered something good. So is poetry just easy, or what? Like, what's so respectable about poetry?
I don't know that because you can do it, it is easy, and I mean you specifically, but
well, that's not really what I was trying to say. Like, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm the poet. Like, I'm not trying to say I'm a poet and I'm not even aware of my own potential. I'm not trying to say that. I was just like, really, this poem didn't have any historical accuracy. It was just strong words put together with a little bit of, like you say, the boy becoming man becoming boy reversal with a little weird hook.
So the weird hook, let me be honest, when you read a poem out loud, I think there's just something about, I only have the ability to intake so much, right? And so I will get fixated on an idea. So if I'm being perfectly honest, that idea consumed my brain, and I'm really not justifying. You totally got me with the inaccuracies, and I wasn't searching for them. So I'm not trying to get my way out.
I knew with certainty I would get you with those. So,
but I let those.
I didn't know Austria was landlocked. I had to look up and make sure. I'd looked for a landlocked country initially. Like, that was the whole point.
That helps me. Makes me feel a little better anyway. But all the other inaccuracies were just kind of washing over me as I'm thinking, damn, that's a cool thought of like how we always think about, child becomes man, not man becomes child. And like that novel presentation of fear occupied my headspace as you were reading that poem. So then I was like, that's a quality idea. And so I just let the other feelings with you just saying the other stuff. I couldn't tell you one other line. I heard the word musket and jets and stuff, but that's all I heard was the first idea. And it's not always the first idea presented, right? Like any poem you're reading, if it especially if it's just oral, I'm gonna
right. Sure, yeah, you're at a disadvantage not having the words in front of you.
Yeah, but I'm not
sure.
not justifying or anything. I'm just letting you know. So, and I would say that in order to be a good poem, you need at least one of these novel ideas that makes I don't want to say majority, but just some number of readers or listeners go, that's a thoughtful presentation of that idea. It made me think in a little bit of a new way. And so you did that. So yes, you accomplished a quality poem in that regard.
So that's a really, to me, that's a really important thing. At least in your definition of what a poem is, it has to have some central idea or some kind of hook, right? Like something that makes you consider what you're reading.
A mental stimulator, yeah.
Right. I would consider it analogous in a novel to the theme of the novel, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, is a grounding idea that everything else is kind of built and constructed around.
Well, let me contrast it, though. It could be an image in a poem. So a mental stimulator is more accurate than saying a meaningful thought, because that was a meaningful thought. But had you presented something just filled with imagery that occupied my thoughts for that moment, right. I mean, I guess the beauty of poetry is it doesn't have to be narrative, or it usually isn't a narrative. It's just a compelling.
Could it be not a visual or an idea? Could it be a semantic hook? So if the poem, for example, repeated the same beginning to every sentence, like maybe it was, what if birds could dig? What if pigs could read? What if... You see what I'm saying? This is a stupid poem that's not... Maybe it is a... What do you think? Is that professional?
That's actually a nice frame to when you find some of those, which you do, then to give that to students and say, write your own poem using this frame device. That's just where my brain goes. That doesn't really help our discussion. No, it doesn't make it professional, I don't think, at that point.
Well, it doesn't make it professional, but do you think that having that sort of repetition or semantic hook is equivalent to having the idea be a hook or a visual be a hook? Is it just as valid?
Yes, but not personally.
That just doesn't really appeal. Does it seem cheap or something?
It feels a little bit cheap if there isn't. Well, I mean, you can think of Martin Luther King's "I have a dream" speech, and I have a dream that someday, and so it's actually effective both as an orator and as an audience, because all the ideas we just discussed, when you're hearing something orally, you can only process so much. But if you have that, first of all, it almost lubricates your speech. You're able to flow through those parts because of automaticity kicks in, and I can clearly go back to that phrase, and then it propels me forward so I can have a convincing and commanding speech, and that repetition primes the audience, and we're ready for more. So there's a lot of good things that go on with that, but that is structure and nothing else. That structure needs to have some quality to it, because I think the "I have a dream" that is actually both structurally sound and a sort of a novel idea, or at least a good presentation of the entirety of the point, right?
Sure.
So that's a good case for why it's an amazing and famous speech.
Right.
So, yes, you're on your way when you have that structural component, but that structure has to have quality as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you can't simply say things that are blue and paint a visual of blue. I have a blue house. I have a blue Corvette. I have...
I'm blue, da boo da boo
da. I was trying to think of all the other blue things.
Yeah, I don't.
But just saying blue things doesn't make it enough of a poem. I mean, as we said, anything can be a poem. But if you don't have good content as well, then it kind of falls flat.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
To me, yeah. Well,
to
yes,
you.
Yes.
Obviously to you. All right. Okay. Moving forward. This one is called Failure. Failure is an emotional arc, a cousin of deception. Breastfeeding requires that I swallow the remnants of dreams and insufficient programs, half upgraded and all failure. Best intentions leads to hell.
This reminds me of something I wrote. And I think you could you, I'm trying to remember exactly what I have, but something's emotionally stunted cousin, and no, I know that's what you've done here, so at least I identified that, and I did not like your rendition of it. And before I even put it together, I did not like it, and I was like, this is crap.
Oh man, that's really funny.
That is funny. Can you read? Do you have my piece?
Oh yes, I do. Man, God, you're really on it. You're on this stuff, man. God, you're a good teacher. All right.
Well, I wrote it. Of course, I should.
There's no getting around it.
It was a couple of years ago.
So, by the way, that is your poem translated from English to Serbian to Portuguese to Icelandic and back to English again.
Okay, because it was close enough. Okay, go ahead.
Your original is: failure is disappointment's emotionally stunted cousin. Disappointment demands I drift through the debris of dreams and unrealized plans, half-actualizations and whole miscues, best intentions and pathways to hell.
God, I'm so pretentious. God. Okay,
that's a poem.
Now can you read?
That's a poem, though.
It's a micro poem, and I liked it at the time, and I stand by some of the phrases. I mean, I was being a little experimental with words, and I just
how long ago was this? I didn't write that down. I mean, this was, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago.
Is it that long ago?
This was a while back.
Yeah, it was a while back. I would say 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'm not embarrassed by it. I just
I don't think it's embarrassing.
It's an idea. There's some meat to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't pick it out to make fun of it or your micro poetry. I picked it out because it had a very funny translation.
So could you read that one
somehow?
more time?
Yeah. Failure is an emotional arc, a cousin of deception. Breastfeeding requires that I swallow the remnants of dreams and insufficient programs.
At that point, I was like, what is this?
Half upgraded and all failure. Best intentions leads to hell. I can't believe that the word breastfeeding came out of this.
Out of what exactly? What was that line?
Out of disappointment demands I drift through the debris of dreams and unrealized plans. See, breastfeeding requires that I swallow the remnants of dreams and insufficient programs.
That's not good.
Where does breastfeeding come out of that?
I was playing with alliteration as disappointment demands drift through the debris of dreams. I like the drifting of the debris of dreams.
The alliteration is really nice.
And so I was just playing with that. But the breastfeeding, disappointment gets to breastfeeding.
Somehow. I don't understand that. Well, I mean, I tried to pick strange and different languages for this path of translation. I just love that it came out with the word breastfeeding and swallow. Breastfeeding and swallow both made it into the same phrase, which is why I was like, well, I have to use this.
I also happened to that's actually when the poem went off the rails, and I had not suspected, I don't know when I suspected that was my poem or whatever, bastardized somehow, but that moment with the breastfeeding is when I started to go, oh, this is bad. So at least when it got to bad was not from me, I want to go back to your war poem for a second. You said if you fixed it. I actually think you should not fix it. Leave in all the what's it called, anachronisms, and it's both funny and serious. I mean, one of the obviously the seriousness suffers when you make a legitimately heartfelt point about the terror of war. So you're not trying to poke fun at war, but there's something whimsical and light, and then there's something really heavy about it, and the juxtaposition of those two things is just kind of fun. So I think you should just throw it out there and see how many people get mad or like it.
Throw it out there?
I mean, publish it to poetry.org or whatever. Become a poet. That's what I mean.
Maybe I will.
Post it to your Facebook wall.
Maybe I'll make some cool poetry art.
Yeah, Good luck finding a site. They all changed. I used to play around with those word art type sites, but now they put their stamp on it or charge you or
Bastards.
just don't exist anymore. Yeah, that's terrible. It's terrible.
All right, I have another composition for you.
Let's do it.
Beautiful whale. Oh, God, I can't read. Beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Alas, I am very sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. O ill-fated bridge of the silvery Tay, I now must conclude my lay by telling the world fearlessly, without the least dismay, that your central girders would not have given way, at least many sensible men do say, had they been supported on each side with buttresses. At least many sensible men confesses, for the stronger we our houses do build, the less chance we have of being killed.
So obviously this is some sort of ode to a collapse of a bridge in, what'd you say, 1879?
That is correct.
What's the title of this poem?
The Tay Bridge Disaster.
It feels very real, and it actually feels... I did not like it. Not to say... I mean, the subject matter actually sounds like it is... You know, it's a tragedy, and this is an ode to remember these people, I suppose, but it did not feel... It wasn't particularly heartfelt, and in fact, it just felt almost... I didn't feel depth to that. And there's the factual component of the bridge collapsing, but what moment did you present me or anyone that was novel or sincere or heartfelt or whatever? I mean, it was just like, this bridge collapsed and we'll remember it, and that's, you know, if only the buttresses had been stronger. Like, I felt nothing through this, and you know, when it comes to a tragedy, you should be primed to, like, it's almost like it's going to tug on your emotional heartstrings. It's going to at least make some attempt to humanize this disaster, and it didn't even attempt. So it was I just didn't like it. So I'm going to say it was real, but I did not like it.
You have the majority opinion then. That is by a poet called William McGonagall, who is widely considered to be the worst poet ever.
Yay!
And I will also say that that's an excerpt from the poem, The Tay Bridge Disaster. Because I didn't want... It was
Pretty
much
long.
longer than that.
But still, it's almost offensively not heartfelt.
It's very dry. It's very dry. And I love the horrible rhyming.
There was a part about confesses and buttresses or something, or like, what?
Yes.
What was that? Did you just rhyme? Ugh.
Well, so when I feel like rhyming in poetry has the same split among, I don't know where I'm getting this from, but see if you think this sounds accurate, has the same divisiveness when it comes to the audience that puns do for humor. So some people think that puns are just cringeworthy and awful. Some people think they're clever. Some people think rhyming poems are just base and just so corny and tacky. Mm-hmm. And some people think that they require skill and so on.
I would agree with that.
And this is a very strong argument in favor of the people who say that rhyming is tacky, because it's almost like it was like, oh, lots of words end in A, so I'll just make a poem where pretty much everything ends in A, but then when I can't think of one, I'll just rhyme 1879 and a very long time, or buttresses with confesses.
Yeah, it was gross.
So this guy is actually really interesting. He was a professional poet. This is what he did, was write poetry. And he covered lots of disasters. He wrote primarily about disasters and newsworthy items. And he was kind of lampooned, but also loved. And it's almost like the B movies of poetry back in the day.
Yeah.
Is William McGonagall. I have another poem of his.
When you said he was loved, do you mean sarcastically, or some people genuinely liked his stuff, or it's hard to even define?
In the same way that we love B movies, people loved William McGonagall and his poems.
But this seems
they would be printed.
I'm going to guess that bridge really collapsed. It really is a tragedy.
It really did collapse, and 90 people, or some tens of people really did die, and like this was a historical poem written by this guy recounting the tragedy of the bridge. And he wrote like 3 poems about this. He lived in the area where this bridge was. Before it crashed, he wrote a poem about how beautiful the bridge was. There's another poem about a whale that swam around in the bay. And then the bridge collapsed, and he wrote about the collapse. And then they rebuilt it, and he wrote about the rebuilt bridge. He had a poem for every occasion.
Oh, man. Do you think if like there was a really terrible documentary on, say, like Columbine, or and it was just
write a poem about it,
laughably bad documentary, would we enjoy that, or would we find it, because this is a sensitive subject in which it's not a laughing matter, and then it would feel a little more uncomfortable to laugh at the ineptness as he's characterizing the people in the film. You know what I'm saying? Like this sounds like what he's doing is he's a documentarian / bad poet, and that's weird over tragedies.
It is weird, and certainly I think it's much easier for you and I to laugh at him now.
Right. It's safe to laugh about a tragedy of a bridge, hundreds
in 1879.
Yeah.
Right. But if it were someone today writing about the Parkland shooting or something, then that would be a little bit more difficult to laugh at.
The disgust factor would be much, much higher. Yeah.
Right. So I have another poem of his that's significantly longer. If you want to hear another example of his bad poetry,
I do.
I can read it.
Maybe not
I might
the whole
not
thing.
I might not read the whole thing. Yeah.
I'll stop you when my tolerance is.
This one is called "The Sorrows of the Blind."
Okay. Interesting.
Pity the sorrows of the poor blind, for they can but little comfort find. As they walk along the street, they know not where to put their feet. They are deprived of that earthly joy of seeing either man, woman, or boy. Sad and lonely through the world they go, not knowing a friend from a foe, nor the difference betwixt day and night, for the want of their eyesight. The blind mother cannot see her darling boy, that was once her soul's joy. By day and night, since she lost her precious sight, to her the world seems dark and drear, and she can find no comfort here. She once found pleasure in reading books, but now pale and careworn are her looks. Since she has lost her eyesight, everything seems wrong and nothing right.
Okay, that's enough, I think.
I love it. Look, I love how bad it is. Why is it so bad?
Well, I think that's what I was going to say. What I said earlier, I'm glad we defined it. This kind of unfolded beautifully, because I was saying there has to be an idea or an image that is presented in a novel way that makes the audience for a moment like think in a different way. But the overly simplified examination of like, okay, going blind is a perfectly valid topic to write about, but the presentation of it has the intellectual rigor of like a third grader. Like it's just like, if you're blind, you can't see, you don't know where to pee. Like, okay, like,
right? That's so good. Wow, that's excellent poetry. You can't pee when you're blind, not as effectively as you can when you can see. Wow.
So yeah, no presentation of new. So the rhyme scheme is simple, but it isn't the simplicity of the rhyming. You just need something that is thoughtful, and there's just no thought.
I think another thing that makes it really cringeworthy is that some of the sentences or some of the lines are really reaching, and it's obviously that the only reason they're there is because it fits the rhyme, not because it contributes anything to what he's saying. Like, since she has lost her eyesight, everything seems wrong and nothing right. Like, this is a very contrived and squashed in line.
It actually feels like, a student of mine forced to just hit, X amount of rhymes. So.
Yes, it sounds super amateur. It's weird that you can pick that out, but that's the way it is with old Willie McGonagall.
Willie McGonagall. Yeah.
All right, I have another for you.
Good.
This one is called Une Promenade. Sore feet, oh so dirty. Why do we do this? Me so thirsty. It is all but a life's dream to have the means to suffer, but in the end it is still undoubtedly worth it. I think I'll go take me another walk, that is.
I'm going to ask you to read that one again.
Sore feet, oh so dirty. Why do we do this? Me so thirsty. It is all but a life's dream to have the means to suffer, but in the end, it is still undoubtedly worth it. I think I'll go take me another walk, that is.
Ugh. Okay. I don't know why I'm going to say that this is a real poem, although it meets none of the... It hits every point. There's no substance. It's not revealing a new idea. It's bereft of content but yet something in my gut tells me that this is an actual poem, and I'm going to have trouble articulating why that is, but I stand by it.
Well, it has the rhyme scheme. Dirty, thirsty, suffer another.
Sure. Promenade. Well, it's one of those that only makes sense when you study the historical context, because if this is a real poem with historical context, and if it is real, is made famous primarily by the name and the context, like the name of the author who's experiencing this, that, and the other that is significant in some way. And so all of that would lead to, you have to really dig for the meaning and then present that in a different light, and then it has some meaning. So I don't think it's good. I did not enjoy it at all, and I think it's a real poem.
Well, you will enjoy it when I tell you that it's by our friend David.
No. Is it really?
It's written by David from France. Une promenade is French for a walk, and it's a poem about taking a walk.
Wait, this is a real poem. Wait, you're confusing me.
It is a real poem by our friend David. I mean, it's a poem that he wrote. It's not professional. Yes, our friend David, the one that we both know and love, wrote this poem.
David wrote this poem.
That's right. He crafted it just for us.
Man. Okay, well, you heard all my opinions of it.
I love it. I think it's wonderful.
Can I hear it
I especially
one more time?
I especially like the line "Me so thirsty."
That's what was throwing, like, me so thirsty. There was another sort of noun. Read it one more time for me, please.
Sore feet, oh so dirty. That's very appropriate. Why do we do this? Me so thirsty. It is all but a life's dream to have the means to suffer, but in the end, it is still undoubtedly worth it. I think I'll go take me another walk, that is.
I'm so mad at myself for not just saying that's not real, obviously. Because, I mean, I mean it when I say, like, this did not hit any of the... It just felt like you dug for something that...
It has a deep idea, like, the joy of taking a walk despite having sore feet and being thirsty and just the impediments of nature, and yet it's still worth it. Even though we suffer, it's still worth it. And not only that, but he'll go take another walk.
I actually thought of it as someone was captive, they were a prisoner of war or something, but also allowed some, like, a simple freedom, and that was hugely important. I swear that's what I was thinking, and that's why I was like, okay, if you dug deep and you realized the context, and some famous person scribbled a few bits about the importance of being able to take a walk despite all the mistreatment, despite all the things in their life that were miserable, this simple walk kind of gave him hope. And so
right.
maybe I'm sensing something about David. He feels like a prisoner on some deeper level. I don't know why I think prisoner, but I swear that's what I was thinking.
I read it and thought that it was very appropriate for David. I mean, he does like to explore and go on walks, and man, I was very, very, very pleased when he sent me this.
So you reached out to him to say, this is what I'm doing?
Yeah, I asked him to write a poem for me.
I'm thrilled. Oh, man.
I have another.
Okay.
I have another. Here we are. Oh, I tell you that you can see it in the morning. What makes us proud, that shadows are always shining. There are big lines and bright stars between a dangerous battle. Are the walls we see walking so quiet? And a red rocket eruption exploded. Please make sure our flag is still there at night. Oh, the Star Key Band is still changing. The country of freedom and the home of the country.
Well, okay, first of all, I was going to say that I can feel, if you've noticed, I was really on my game, and then I'm really off, I didn't say off my game, but there seems to be a poetry fatigue when you're exposed to lots of things. It just all starts to become muddled. But this was clearly the Star Spangled Banner run through something similar to what you did to my poem, but pretty funny. And I wonder, like, I just wonder, I'm glad I caught that. That was good.
That you're wrong.
Wait, what?
This is a legitimate real poem by Shakespeare.
Really?
No, you're right.
I'm so gullible.
You're exactly right. No, this was the Star Spangled Banner, the first bit of it, translated from English to Japanese to Turkish to Norwegian to Zulu and then back to English.
What program are you using to do that? Is there some sort of just Google
Translate? I
fun?
just did it a bunch of times.
Oh, okay, I've heard something that'll do through like 100 languages. So
yeah, I tried to find that, but on a brief search I couldn't, and so I ran it through languages until it sounded somewhat poetic,
different enough. Yeah,
yeah.
Like
that one was pretty obvious, but it changed it somewhat.
It did.
Sounded poetic.
Well, when you started reading and I had not identified it as the Star Spangled Banner,
yeah.
I was thinking the whole fatigue thought of like, this is getting more difficult, and I don't think it's because like I'm all of a sudden less adept. I think it is this sort of fatigue phenomenon where like if you wrestle with poetry long enough, or you hear just some poems and some not poems, it all starts to blend together. I really think that's happening. So.
Well, you're in luck. We have nothing but really excellent poetry left.
Okay, great. Let's do it.
All right, here's one. This one is called Lasagna. Layer and layers of pasta on the bottom baking dish. Next is the ground beef. Then a layer of pasta. The layer of cheese. Another layer of beef. Followed by another layer of pasta. Then comes the cheese. Next, green peppers. Then pepperoni, served with garlic bread.
Give me a break, man. You're wasting my time here. Like, this is you reading the finished product of an instruction, or like cooking instructions that you've spaced out to sound like right. I have to be right. If this is a poem, I reject. If you tell me this is a real poem, then like no, like poetry.org or whatever is not an okay source for you to declare that was not a real poem. Like I am with authority saying that's not a real poem, regardless of your answer. That was the end. So after you've got your ingredients on like a website, and you scroll down and it says first, it gives what you just read, and then you just spaced it out. Yes.
This is a poem by Darlene de Beaulieu.
No, it's not. I can tell you.
It is from a poetry forum, so this is an amateur poet. Not a professional poet.
But the problem with it is.
But it was published as a poem on a poetry forum.
Yeah, well, still no. The answer is emphatically it's not a poem or of any quality. I mean, like in the sense that you were. I think you would agree with me. Like, I'm a little.
This
frustrated
is poetry.
By this. No, it's not.
Based on your definition that we started out with, this is poetry.
Sure. Well, like and like. But here's the thing, like even studying, say, what did I say, like an outhouse, not an outhouse,
a porta
potty, like might
a neo-outhouse
in a unique context provide some insights about our culture, where you start thinking, wow, we have this portable, and you could start thinking. But if you're just very descriptive, like explanation of what a lasagna is, there's no metaphor for layers of life. There's nothing in there. It is baseline and just No, it's not a poem, man. Like it's not a poem worth reading out loud ever again. So sure, we can call it a poem by these loose definitions. I guess this is why I'm frustrated, because I buy into the fact that we have, in order to create a space for unique and interesting poems, I have to accept that these loosey-goosey definitions are going to yield things like what you just read and declaring it poetry and kind of poking fun. Like it's easy to get poked fun at if we're going to say that that's a freaking poem. Like it's not a worthwhile poem. It's so not worthwhile that like there need to be guardians.
Poetry police.
Yes, and I'm going to be a poetry police person right now. And
I love that I essentially made you sound like me.
Yeah, well, that's what you took me from being loosey goosey to nope. We got to draw the line somewhere. Even though that
we
fits
draw
all
it at
the standards.
lasagna.
And we draw it at lasagna. It was called lasagna.
It's called lasagna.
I mean, and then it was just like, here's a layer, here's a layer, here's a layer, and it's like, no.
Maybe my favorite thing about this is that I thought, I want a nonsense poem, and I Googled lasagna poem, and this is what turned up for me. So it's very appropriate. Like, Google is on it.
Yeah, well, there's nothing to discuss. It's like, yes, that is lasagna. I mean, it would just be like hamburger, bun, patty, cheese, lettuce. Good. Take a bite. Like, it's not. Sure, I guess it is. I'll still even let it in, but it's not worth considering, looking at, praising, critiquing. It's not worth the page it's published on. So.
Oh man, what a scathing critique of lasagna. Sorry, Darlene.
Darlene. Okay, okay. Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Let's try this one. This is a short one. This one is called. Actually, I'll tell you the title after I read the poem. So often I go up to people, throw wide my embrace, open myself up, only to find they take me down a few levels, and all too soon leave me empty. And that one's called Elevator.
Oh, I like that because it's from the perspective of an elevator. That's clever. I like it. I like it a lot. So I'm more comfortable telling you whether I think something has quality or not than I am whether it is technically a real poem or not. But I'm going to say real poem. I could see you writing it too.
Yeah, I wrote that one.
Good, man. That's a good poem, and that's so much better than lasagna.
I should have just strategically placed all of mine after lasagna.
Yeah, well, then it screws with me because that was good. Because I think there, how often kindness is mistaken for weakness, and so there's the human element when you're not calling it elevator. Like it provides that. I'll call it a nugget of wisdom or something worth contemplating. It has that element to it. And then you call it elevator and you throw in kind of is that a pun?
It's a double entendre.
A double entendre without...
As opposed to lasagna, which was just a single entendre.
Just entendre. You don't...
A single lasagna.
No, I like that. What you wrote. Could you read it one more time?
So often I go up to people, throw wide my embrace, open myself up, only to find they take me down a few levels, and all too soon leave me empty.
I like that.
Elevator, because that's what an elevator does.
I know, it's exactly what an elevator does, and there's the human application.
All right.
Bennett, that was good. I liked that one.
Thank you. I'm a poet. All right. This one is called A Box. Out of kindness comes redness, and out of rudeness comes rapid same question. Out of an eye comes research. Out of selection comes painful cattle. So then the order is that a white way of being round is something suggesting a pen, and it is disappointing. It is not. It is so rudimentary to be analyzed and see a fine substance, strangely. It is so earnest to have a green point, not to red, but to point again.
What? I don't know if I got lost initially and could not get back on the train of thought. I'm going to ask you to read it one more time if you don't mind, because I got derailed and could not get back on. I'm going to see if it was my fault or if the poem is truly nonsense.
Out of kindness comes redness, and out of rudeness comes rapid same question. Out of an eye comes research, out of selection comes painful cattle. So then, the order is that a white way of being round is something suggesting a pin, and it is disappointing. It is not. It is so rudimentary to be analyzed and see a fine substance strangely. It is so earnest to have a green point, not to red, but to point again.
Man, this sounds like nonsense by like a poem generator where you like chose the word pen and it sort of like talked about the point, and I have no idea whether either I just have no idea what it was saying. No idea. Could not follow it the second time any better at all. I don't even feel like the sentences structurally completed thoughts, which is okay. You can actually have like fragments as long as they're giving impressions, but I didn't get impressions. I couldn't visualize anything. I felt so ostracized by this thing you read to me that
it's called a box.
It's called a box. That doesn't the point. I did not do it for me. I don't know what that was, and I didn't enjoy it, and I feel a little. I feel even more fatigued after being like that. That's kind of what like the teaching. Let's say for a moment that's poetry, and I present it to a class. It's no wonder the kids that go ugh, like they might be having that experience. This is what I'm experiencing is what I think the people who do not like poetry experience.
Even with good poetry.
Even with good poetry. And so I have to, this is like a learning experience where I go, okay, well, if that's what they're experiencing, I mean, no wonder they hate poetry, because it's just, it agitates you, like at your core. It feels like it's poking fun at your intellect while revealing, something grand to other people that you don't have access to, and it's just annoying, and I don't get it. I did not get that. What was that, Bennett? Because I would say it's not a poem.
That is a poem by a professional poet, my favorite poet, Gertrude Stein.
Oh, God, Gertrude Stein, Tender Buttons or whatever.
Yes. I love Gertrude Stein. I love that nonsense.
Gertrude Stein. I mean, I internalized in the background to Gertrude Stein. I'm not going to give her historical background, but studying her in college, I came across, was it Tender Buttons? I think that's what it was
Tender
called.
Buttons, that's what it's called.
And she was like, it was nonsense. I mean, you could say it was experimenting with words that do give sort of impressions that it wasn't. I don't believe it was made up words. It's like, can we read some of the, like, I remember calling you in hysterics, like reading and going, this is real. Do you have I'm gonna
I have a handful. Well, this is what I was going to round out the topic with, because I find her poetry so absurd and nonsensical, and it's professional poetry, and that's what she did. Like, I just think that this is like this counters poetry.
Well, let me be clear too. She was like hot stuff when she was, she was born in 1874 and lived to 1946. And she, this is what I remember too. She hosted a salon in Paris where leading figures of modernism in literature and art, such as Pablo Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ezra Pound, like all these big names came through. And mingled with her, and so she just wrote these. I don't even know what you want to call it, but she wrote these poems that, God, just ticked me off.
For the remainder, we're going to test whether you can detect Gertrude Stein.
Okay.
How about that? That ought to be
fair enough. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. You have to say Stein or not Stein.
Okay.
A charm. This is called nothing elegant.
Okay.
A charm, a single charm, is doubtful. If the red is a rose, and there's a gate surrounding it, if inside is let in, and there places change, then certainly something is upright. It is earnest.
Stein.
That is correct.
I have no pride in getting that right. I don't know. I feel lost. But like giving the impression of someone like making me feel lost is just so easy to do. I could not tell you why. I mean, it would be easy to imitate Stein, and maybe a fun little exercise for my students. I mean, I need to consider that.
That would be a fun. Well, I think it would be fun.
It might be regressive though if I say this is poetry and like
You're right. Yeah, it might. Try this one on for size. This one is called Toolbox. Does crosshatched beget impervious? How storing stores ask, is it enough? But even questioning is theft. Sitting on a seat, sitting on a bed, sitting on Saturday, I read a stanza, a wrench, a void. Alone, I am traded and betrayed and no more. It was misbegotten chrome.
I mean, seems Steinian, but the reason I'm going to say not Stein is because there was a line in there about I said and I read, and it just started to have just an inkling of flow. So I think by accident, but Stein, being an expert, would have said, nope, that's a little too much flow for me, and would have gone in and corrected that upon, Can you imagine editing for her and like,
oh my God. I don't think anyone did.
So I'm going to say not Stein just because of that inkling, and I have no other thing to base anything on. I feel so bewildered offering my critiques here. So no, not Stein.
I wrote that Stein-like poem. That's actually that was a poem about you writing poems on your toolbox.
I wish I had known that. I almost want to hear that again. Oh man, but I don't need to.
All right. Let's do like maybe two more.
Okay.
Detained on the created heaven in your eyes was a form and white and artisans on the face of the need, instead of moving on the face of the wires.
Stein.
No. That is the first verse of the Bible as understood by Microsoft's voice dictation program.
That's a good way to do a Steinian poem. Just a poor...
Honestly, that sounds like a Stein poem, and it's actually just me reading the first couple lines of the Bible to my computer.
I like that. That's a fun way to do something like that.
I did that with a lot of stuff to try to get some good crap poetry, and my computer is insane. Like the stuff it hears is just ridiculous. Let me read you. That's about
a fun segment. You read this, and this is what came out as like a fun idea for future. Like, I don't know. We can turn that into a game.
All right, so I'm going to read you a couple of these. You did excellent on the poetry guessing. By the way,
thank you.
Stein, as much as I love Gertrude Stein's poems, and reading them actually makes me laugh out loud because they're nonsense. I don't think they play well for me reading them out loud because it is just nonsense, and you just get so tired by the fifth word.
It's exhausting, and I'm like, okay, I get it. It's nonsense. Like you're not giving me new, right. Nothing interesting.
But when you're looking at it, on the page and seeing that you're on a poetry website and this is by a poet, and you're reading gibberish, like every subsequent word makes you not believe that what you're doing is real. And so Gertrude Stein cracks me up. I remember when we discovered her, or at least when you told me about her, I wrote 3 or 4 Stein poems and sent them to you, just being silly.
Right, and it made me laugh. Oh man.
Yeah, I found them. They're like that was from like 2000 when was it? It was like 2007 or something. Like it's a long, long time ago.
The reason I think it tickles you and annoys me is because you did come at poetry with a little more of a derisive attitude, or a little more of like, this is a little bit silly, and so it does nothing in favor of me trying to say this is a holy craft that we need. It is so regressive in that like it is so wildly, and she's trying to say like, screw structure, see, let's push the boundaries, and okay, point taken, but ugh, like,
but do better.
But do better, yeah. Make me feel something,
right? So yeah, I actually don't dislike poetry. I do dislike how pretentious it often is, and I really dislike this nonsense structure breaking stuff. But I really appreciate a good rhyme. I'm definitely the category of people who enjoy when someone can pick a difficult structure and make it rhyme and convey something that presents an idea or an image. Like, yeah. I can appreciate the skill involved in that. And so I can appreciate that. Certain themes are not going to play well with me, but from simply a writing skill standpoint, I think it's interesting. I had one thought that I wanted to run by you with regards to rhyming, because I really do feel like the should it rhyme, should it not rhyme, like these are two sides of a civil war in all of poetry.
If there is a war, that would be it.
If there is a war, then that's it. And what do you think about this theory? So way, way, way back in the day, all of our writing was prose, and even our beautiful writing was prose. And then some artistic...
I'm going to accept that claim is true. I don't know it to be.
I don't know it's true either. This is just me speculating. But like, obviously, all writing, we've had music for a long time, but the popular and published writing was prose, but the artistic people who wanted to push the boundary and be creative decided, I'm going to break the mold, and I'm not going to bind myself to just flowery language and sentences and descriptions, and I'm going to work in a different structure, and I'm going to control rhyme and meter, and I'm going to make it weird. I'm going to break the mold here. Mm-hmm. And that was poetry, and that's why it became popular, because it was essentially thumbing the nose at prose. And oh man, listen to me, spontaneous poet. And so that's how poetry came to be. And now when you look at modern poetry, when I was looking at poetry.org or whatever the heck it was, and looking at poetry from this decade, very little of it rhymed. And it just struck me that, like, this, to me, when I read a lot of this stuff, it just seems like someone is saying a thing and they decided to write it down and put a title on it and call it poetry. And it's almost like they're thumbing their nose at poetry and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be bound by your rules of rhyming and meter. I'm just going to write what I want and call it poetry.
Do you think there'll be an ebb and flow in terms of, if poetry is somehow countercultural, the way you described it, it's like, oh, this is the way things are being done, I'm going to resist and produce something of my own accord, and then once that becomes a solidified or norm state, then if you're all about thumbing the nose, then it's just going to kind of go back and forth. I mean, in the same way, I think that conservative liberal dynamic of, like, you're starting to see a new surge in, like, young kids and conservatism, because liberalism is becoming that sort of norm, and the counterculture is then conservatism, and then by the time
you
they
even
grow
have
up,
different phases of abstract art and realistic art, and I imagine that there's probably a similar pendulum swing in movies and their themes and direction and stuff like that. Like, I just think that, creative people are always trying to separate themselves from the norm and from the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, when I saw so many modern poems that just didn't rhyme and didn't have any care for the sound and the rhythm of what they were, it just struck me, and I was like, I wonder if that's really what's going on a broader level.
I think, trends are just going to emerge. So if you fall in love with poetry and you tend to read the poets of the day, you're going to be influenced by poets of the day. It's the same with music or movies. Everyone's pulling from the collective bucket, the chamber you exist within. So you're inspired by what's currently being crafted around you, and then you use that as inspiration. You fall in love with whatever. And when you're a kid, you're exposed to, I don't know, like, filmmakers were exposed by Spielberg and whoever the big names are, and then you're just bound to reflect that in your movie making later on. So the same would be true for poets. So if no one's rhyming and you were influenced by non-rhymers, then you might tend to write non-rhyming until you go, I want to carve out my own niche and be that rhymer, and or you start to really dig deeply into poetry and read everyone's stuff, and then fall in love with someone who rhymes. It sounds so simple to say rhymers and non-rhymers, and that's the dichotomy of poetry. But
that is.
But I think poetry is reactionary, or just almost everything's reactionary. It's like, oh, I like this fashion, and these designers influenced me, and now I'm going to design, and it's going to have that take, and then maybe once you express yourself even more, you want to find your own declaration. So you look not within yourself, but you look at like, well, what's not being done right now? So
right, opportunistic poetry. Yeah. So that's. I want to read you one of my computer dictation poems.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you the title. I want to see if you can first figure out what it is, and then I also just want you to hear how insane my computer is.
Okay.
Somebody once told me the world is Carol Rainey. I am the shortest school
I've
and
already
show.
got it. But keep going.
Jews looking tired on what their finger on a song in the shape of the now went for a while.
Knowing what this is so funny.
I know. We use our time and cannot stop coming to the rules, and I hit the ground running. Them a sense of aloha for farm near an Islamic jihad against all.
Islamic jihad. You cannot make the case that it heard separate words. Islamic jihad for all? Is that the last?
A sense of aloha for farm near an Islamic jihad against all.
Against all. Oh my God.
This is unaltered. Like, I didn't touch this. I just obviously started singing All Star by Smash Mouth.
I knew
one
that.
of the best pieces of musical
of course, the
history.
Best to choose.
And that's what
told me. And that's what
somebody once told me. The world is Carol Rainey.
Yeah, will you sing it actually?
No, I'm not going to sing it. Well, it doesn't fit exactly. Is the thing.
Yeah.
It just like kind of hurt. Well, I just thought it was so absurd that my computer put Jews and Islamic jihad in the verse of All Star by Smash Mouth.
Do you have a political computer? Like, what is
I'd
happening?
never use. Actually, this was on my work computer that I did this, and I'd never used dictation before. I had to like turn it on and activate it, and this is what it came up with.
So there's no. It didn't learn from past dictation. There's just no way. This is just what it heard when you.
How did it get Islamic jihad? Where does it pull this? Where is its dictionary coming from?
Right, and Islamic jihad are two different
Islamic
words,
jihad are two words, so it obviously knows some phrases.
Right, to combine those two things. Could you piece together what you were saying that heard Islamic jihad? What are the lyrics at that point?
I don't remember.
Yeah. That just... it's so far off.
I'll never... What does he say? I'll never make sense.
I know all the lyrics, but I don't remember what part of the song you're at that
My
point.
brain gets smart, but my head gets dumb. I think it was right before that, maybe. I don't know.
Anyway, that's absurd.
Oh, man, that's bizarre. I did a bunch. I tried to do some Third Eye Blind songs for you.
I would have enjoyed that.
But they didn't come out even remotely poem worthy. Here's one. This will be the last one that I read. This is a poem called Flowers. When can I help you? Yea, to have a dozen red roses. The police allege me, and I was your beta. That's me. How much? The only $18 a year of change I got in me. A theater testing face. A lot, buying a lot. How poetic was that?
Pretty. It had a. Even though I didn't understand it, it was connected in thought. Like there was some. If you're saying that was a translation on your computer, is that what you're saying? This was a massaged dictation. I massaged it. Okay, because what I was surprised by, if it was just pure dictation, is that it had some cohesiveness, even though I didn't understand it. It was like, well, the money thing and who we are, and like it worked for a crappy poem in a way.
This is my favorite scene from The Room, where Tommy Wiseau buys flowers and pets the dog.
I like that. Oh, that's pleasant.
I enjoyed it. I had to massage it.
Or did you turn the volume up to the movie?
No, I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't turn. That would have been fun to do, actually, is to do that. Turn the volume up and let it Just let it fly. Can I help you? Yeah, have a dozen red roses.
I'd like to see
Oh,
that.
I didn't recognize you, Johnny, or whatever she says.
Yeah, that whole quick scene is
That's
beautiful.
me. That's a line in the poem. That's me. That one stayed untouched.
I noticed you reading it may have changed. Like, I think when you read Smash Mouth, you're like, somebody once told me, and like,
I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
I can't help that.
Somebody once told me. Somebody once told me. Yeah, no, it just
Somebody.
yeah, there's no way to not hear the song when you do that.
I know, impossible.
In closing, can we hear your poem Wooden Teachers one more time?
Yeah, sure.
He's a real poet. You can tell he's a poem.
Near the lake, aside the trail, there grow two trees entwined. One, a proud tall hardwood oak, another softwood pine. At distant glance they seem as one, their trunks a single bole. Yet on approach their likeness wanes, two pieces, not a whole. How came these trees to their embrace? What cause fixed them so? What errant zephyr sowed their seeds so near decades ago? Do they battle for light and rain, upward struggling strife? Or is it mutual support, their difference aiding life? Would they prefer to be apart, instead among their kin? Would felling them be gentle mercy, or the gravest sin? The answer I fear I'll never know, their lives will outlast mine. For now I'll just keep wondering, should I seek oak or pine?
I enjoyed that, man. It's a good poem. I like it.
Thank you. I like it too. It came out a lot better than I expected, just trying to put together some nonsense for you to guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, I think, is that this poetry creates a space for you to concentrate and write some words down in a specific way that can lead to greater realization. Like, the art of practicing it is just as important. So even out of this exercise of, is it poetry kind of thing, led you to create something genuine and real, and like, that's the beauty of poetry.
Yep, time to quit my job.
Yeah. All right, man.
Put in my 2 weeks notice. I will write my 2 weeks notice as a poem.
Perfect. I'd like to hear that sometime.
Today I quit, and I will now work on poetry and my wit.
On a toolbox, I'll sit.
Yes, thank you. Oh, you're contributing, poet. All right, that'll do it. Enough poetry.
Enough poetry. Did it. Bye.